NextGen Africa Talk 2026. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this program will be moderated by two wonderful ladies from Eswatini and Zambia, and myself, Naomi Nwanza from Zambia, and also my friend from Eswatini, Eunice Lamani. But before we start off, again, let me welcome you once again. So let me just share a word of prayer so that we can zoom in, and I'm sure my good friend will join us along the way. Heavenly Father, we are so grateful to you for a time like this. We commit this wonderful program into your hands. Our prayer is that, Lord, take control and let every aspect of this program be a success, that in the end, we shall give you all the glory and the praise. In Jesus' precious name we have prayed. Amen. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me once again welcome you to this morning's session, the NextGen Africa Talk 2026. Today, Africa stands at the center of the 21st century. Nearly 60% of our population is under the age of 25, and close to 70% under the age of 30. This really positions Africa as the youngest and most dynamic continent in human history. Ladies and gentlemen, what this means is that the decisions we make, the systems we build, and the capacities we develop in these moments undoubtedly will shape not only our nations, but the global economy itself. Ladies and gentlemen, consider the scale of our moment as we speak today. In Nigeria, more than 60% of citizens are under 25, yet unemployment and underemployment affect nearly half of that population. Here in Ghana, my home country, almost 60% of citizens are under the age of 30, with many young people navigating unstable or underutilized work. In the backyard here, Kenya, where 80% of the population is 35 and below, innovation thrives alongside persistent labor market pressures. If you zoom in into South Africa, youth unemployment among those aged between 15 and 24 has surpassed 60%, the highest rate globally. In Ethiopia, with 70% of its population under 30, 2 million young people enter the labor market each year. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, across Africa, hundreds of millions of young people are educated, connected, ambitious, and ready. The scale of this generation is extraordinary. The question, therefore, before us this morning is, can we organize this strength into structured impact? At the same time, the international environment, ladies and gentlemen, is evolving rapidly. Global alliances are shifting, trade tensions and tariff disputes dominate economic conversations. In such an arena, Africa's voices must be deliberate, coordinated. As Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney observed recently at the World Economic Forum, nations that are absent from the table risk having their futures as part of the menu and decided for them by other nations seated at the table. The good news is Africa's response to these global forces is already taking shape. Initiatives such as the Accra Research Initiative by the government of Ghana, for example, as we all know, emphasize sovereignty, industrialization, domestic capital formation, and youth employment. They reflect a continental determination to deepen productivity, strengthen institutions, and expand value creation. Ladies and gentlemen, and within this transformation, young Africans cannot and must not be observers. You are participants. You are builders. You are partners in policy, innovation, and enterprise development. NextGen Africa Talk 2026, ladies and gentlemen, therefore exists to catalyze that participation. It is designed as an annual continental convergence of young leaders who recognize that our futures are interconnected. Here, we exchange ideas, compare policy experiences, strengthen networks, and align our ambitions with continental priorities and best practices. Ladies and gentlemen, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, once more, is operational. Its protocol on women and youth in trade creates structured pathways for inclusion. The opportunity before us, therefore, ladies and gentlemen, is immense. Cross-border commerce, regional value chains, free movement of people of the continent, capital and expertise, digital customs systems, and expanded markets across 54 or 55 nations of the continent. For this opportunity to translate into prosperity, however, ladies and gentlemen, our generation must master the tools of competitiveness. That means skills in artificial intelligence, green economy, technologies, advanced manufacturing, agri-tech, digital finance, and cross-border e-commerce must all be aimed at collectively. It requires policy literacy, understanding trade rules, governance frameworks, and institutional processes. It calls for collaboration, ladies and gentlemen, among youth leaders and youth councils, student bodies, innovation hubs, civic networks that learn from one another and scale excellence across borders. Above all, ladies and gentlemen, it calls for unity. Whether we come from Nigeria, Malawi, Kenya, Eswatini, South Africa, Ethiopia, Ghana, or Zimbabwe, or Liberia, or any of the African nations, we share a continental responsibility. Our individual successes are strengthened by collective progress. That is why NextGen Africa Talk is more than a forum. It's a coordination platform. It's a leadership and enterprise incubator. It's a disciplined space where strategy is refined, partnerships are forged, and commitments are made. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Africa's future will be shaped only by those who prepare for it with clarity, competence, courage, and strategy. Let this gathering, today's gathering, mark the beginning of a sustained annual youth-driven continental dialogue, one that advances implementation of Agenda 2063 and strengthens African institutions and equips our young generation to lead with competence and integrity. Tomorrow's leadership, ladies and gentlemen, is built through today's conversations and actions. And today, that work begins with us now. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for what you have, for joining us this morning. And I'm going to go straight to invite the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Kampala University, Dr. Wada, who is also the Vice Chair of the Governing Council of Africa, to give us a welcome address. Dr. Wada, over to you, please, in Kampala.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Day-to-me. I hope I can be seen well. Looks like there's a bit of rain here and the internet is unstable. So I hope I'm audible and I'm also clearly seen by everybody.
Yes, you are.
Is that true?
Yes, you are.
Yes, madam. Yes.
Excellent, excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to be speaking to the brightest minds of our continent. Today we gather to shape the future of Africa, and I am excited to be part of this conversation. Africa's strength lies in its people, innovative, resilient, and driven. As young leaders, you are not just the future, you are the present, poised to drive change. There is an old saying that has traveled across our borders in different tongues. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Here in the Pearl of Africa, we have a saying in Luganda, agali awamu gegalu manyama. The teeth that are together can bite the meat. In 2026, we no longer have the luxury of choosing. To survive the climate crisis, to fix our broken supply chains, and to lead the global digital economy, we must go fast and together. We must bite into these challenges together. I look at you and I don't just see youth. I see the daughter of a market woman in Accra who just coded an app to track crop prices. I see the son of a herder in Samburu using satellite data to find water. I see the university student in Kampala building the next green mobility solution for our borders. You are the bridge between the wisdom of our elders and the speed of our algorithms. Africa's theme of ethical leaders, African solution, resonates deeply. Let's be real for a moment. In our cities, from the tech hubs of Kigali to the busy streets of Kampala, ethics is often a heavy coat to wear. It's easy to talk about integrity in a ballroom. It's much harder when a shortcut means your startup survives another month or a favor gets your family the healthcare they need. But we have seen the alternative. We have seen the big man era, big man in quotes, drain our coffers and stifle our brilliance. Ethical leadership isn't a Western import. It is Ubuntu in action. It is the realization that I am because we are. If I steal from the future to fund my present, I am not a leader. I am a looter of my children's inheritance. African solutions must be rooted in radical transparency. We don't need leaders who want to be served. We need leaders who are obsessed with service. We spent decades trying to export raw materials. In 2026, our greatest export is our culture and our consciousness. When the world listens to Afrobeats or Amapiano or the latest Ugandan Afrofusion, they aren't just hearing a beat. They are hearing the heartbeat of a continent that refuses to stay silent. When a global corporation looks at our leapfrog technology in mobile banking, they are looking at African grit. Look at the Rolex, that humble Ugandan street snack. It was born in a corporate boardroom. It was not born in a corporate boardroom. It was born from the grit and creativity of a vendor who saw a way to make something out of nothing. That is the African DNA. We take what we have, we innovate, feed the nation. Let's be clear, African solutions are not just for us. The world is looking to us for how to build a circular economy. They are looking to us for how to maintain community and resilience in a digital age. We are not just catching up to the West. In many ways, the West is trying to remember the community-led resilience that we never forgot. The world is aging. Africa is young. The world is searching for green energy. Africa holds the minerals and the sunshine. The world is looking for the next beat. Africa is the pulse. When we solve for the last mile in Rwanda, we are creating a blueprint for the global South. When we lead in mobile money, the world follows. We are no longer just represented at the global table. We are beginning to set the menu. I challenge you to leverage global partnerships, but do so as partners, not as subjects. Showcase our fintech, our green hydrogen, our Nollywood, and our Afrobeats, not as curiosities, but as world-class standards. So what is your blueprint? Don't wait for a seat at the global table. Most of those tables aren't built with us in mind anyway. Let's build our own tables. Build your own table. Build it with the timber from our forests, ideas from our universities, and capital from our own success stories. Be the leader who answers the phone. Be the leader. I'll leave you with a thought from the great Wangari Maathai. It's the little things citizens do. That's what will make the difference. Your little thing might be an ethical hiring process. It might be a solar irrigation patent. It might be the way you speak truth to power. Believe in the beauty of your dreams, yes, but more importantly, believe in the power of your deeds. The ancestors are watching. The children are waiting. Let's go to work. Let's stop talking about Africa's potential and start living Africa's reality. Once again, you are most welcome to Africa's NextGen Africa Talk 2026 edition of Tomorrow's Leaders, Today's Conversation. Thank you, and I submit, sir.
Thank you. Webari Mununga, Doc, thank you so much for that wonderful welcome address. That is just to let you know, I have spent, that, that is to, that is to let you know I spent about 7 years of my life living in Uganda. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us one more time. This is the NextGen Africa Talk 2026. And I want to go all the way to Ethiopia and request our guest of honor, Mr. John Magok, the mineral resource development expert at the African Union Commission, to make a few remarks before I hand over to the moderator for the first part of the program. So, John, if you are there, please take over.
Dr. Emmanuel, and I salute you, the headquarters of the African Union, and also to all the leadership of Liga, the Africa Shepherds Initiative, and the youth leaders in this very call. We all know that our continental vision, the Agenda 2063, is aiming for an integrated, peaceful, and prosperous Africa by the year 2063. So it is upon us to do our part in the next 37 years from today to ensure that we deliver for the Africa we want. From where I stand as an expert on mineral resources development, I'm here to tell you that the rupturing of the world order is not a crisis for Africa. It is our greatest opening and opportunity, especially our youth. And I always say that when you talk about minerals, the minerals are borderless. The young people of Africa are also borderless. In fact, I equalize the young people as the strategic minerals in our continent, unlike the gold and oil in our soil. The youth are the resources. They are self-renewing, innovative, and ready to power the African century. If we talk more about the Agenda 23, especially the part that talk about the youth contract, the Africa Youth Charter. And this agenda, ladies and gentlemen, is not a government document, as people may see. It is a generational contract where every African has a say to criticize it, to implement it, appreciate its provision. Specifically, Aspiration 6 mandated the development that is people-driven, relying on the continental potential of the African youth. In the African Union Commission, of course, there are policies and so on, but one major initiative that I just want to highlight, maybe most of you are aware of it. It is the African Union 1 million next level. It is an initiative that is targeting young people in education, employment, entrepreneurship, and engagement. We understand that education is not just literacy, but we are looking at future-proofing education, where we advocate for curriculum that support the socio-economic development in the continent. When it comes to employment, we know majority of young people are under employment, as Dr. Emmanuel indicated in his opening remark. But what do we do to ensure that the future of Africa work is in sustainability, and also it is bank on the untapped potential that we have in our resources. Entrepreneurship, it's a new way of creating employment, and I know a lot of young people who are in this sector. And we are pushing for the Pan-African Youth Equity Fund, move beyond microloans to macro investment in youth-led industrial tech. Of course, the engagement is very important, and this convening is very good, and we do appreciate the Africa of convening the youth across the continent, which is what we want. We need to decide our future in such a convening. Talking about the Africa Agency, we may all know about G20 and all this grouping, BRICS, the United Nations, and all this. Our leaders, they talk about reforming those institutions. But something that we need to focus on as a young people, we really need to break the summoning culture, where it is highlighted in many visions, even in our founders for too long, that Africa used to be summoned to foreign capital to discuss their own policies, not our priorities. So we need to shift the narrative. We want to see African priorities being discussed. And it's good that the African Union now is a member of the G20, trying to shift the discussion, starting from the reform of the global financial architecture that were created long ago before most of our countries are independent. Being in those forums give us an opportunity to present our case with a unified voice, which is most time lacking. But we need to aim for a unified voices when we are in those platforms and when we are trying to shift the narrative, pushing for the reform of those institutions to fit the African priorities. But of course, the new global order, Africa is part of it. We are looking at Africa to act as a stabilizer, to bridge the gap between the global north and the global south with a unified position, and ensuring that the use of the continent in the diaspora and in the motherland are united in a single global African market. The priorities areas from my side, I think I only have two. There are a lot, but I look at the value addition of our minerals is something that we really need to consider. You see the global competition and the geopolitics in regard to critical minerals. Good example is what is happening in the DRC, a vast country, very rich in mineral resources, but the geopolitical competition is heightened. Moreover, it's not helping the people and the citizens of the DRC, and unlike many African countries. So we want to see our commodities contributing toward industrialization, an industrialization that must stop exporting our raw material that is for the future of our youth. We want to add value into our mineral resources in the continent, whereby youth-led innovation are directed toward local processing of our lithium, cobalt, and the rare earth minerals. We have another priority, the African Continental Free Trade Area. And Dr. Emmanuel mentioned about it. This is our borderless playground. The African Continental Free Trade Area is a vehicle for the African vision. It is the end of Berlin Conference borders. We want to work to ensure that the AFCFTA is working for our priorities, especially ensuring that the protocol on women and youth in trade is functional, and it is not just on paper, but it is an instrument that provides digital trade and simplify customs and cross-border payment system for young traders and women across the continent. But of course, we can't achieve the Africa we want without challenges. It is not granted. It must be taken by our hard work. We must ensure that we collaborate across the borders. And it's good that I see a lot of National Youth Council who are in this call. That is the start of collaboration, where young leaders share opportunities across the borders, share aspiration, including even policies, because there are some countries that are well in terms of policies when it comes to youth empowerment and youth development. So we can learn from each other. We don't want to look outside the continent when it comes to good policies and examples that we can use in the continent. So implementation of Agenda 2060 is in our hand. It is in your code in digital space. It is in our farms if you are a farmer. It is in our lab if you are in the university. Even in the protests in the streets where Gen Z are on the streets asking for better governance. These are the actual signs that ensure that Africans are taking their development in their own hands. Ladies and gentlemen, finally, I would like to remind all of us about the African Union anthem. There is a verse that says, let us all unite and toil together to give the best we have to Africa. I believe we need to give best for Africa. We need to give it our level best. The world order is shifting, and as it tilts, let it tilt toward a unified, youth-driven, and sovereign Africa. I thank you very much. Let the conversation begin. Africa forward and youth lead. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you very much, my brother and my good friend John, for that wonderful presentation.
Over to you, Dr. Emmanuel.
Giving us, a sort of insight into what is happening at the African Union Commission, and we are very excited about that. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, let me, at this juncture, invite my other co-moderator, Miss Eunice Dlamini, or from Eswatini, to take over and moderate the next session of the first batch of presenters that are going to be presenting. And let me put it in context that what this particular session is going to do is that the purpose of this is for every National Youth Council that has been selected to speak today to share with us what programs they are doing, what are the challenges, what are some of the best practices that their colleagues in other nations can pick from them. And then after that, we would open the floor for feedback from some of the coordinators. And then at the end of the program, we'll open the floor for general conversation, what somebody will call dialogue. So Ms. Eunice Dlamini, if you are there, please take over and lead us to the next session. Welcome.
Esteemed panelists, guests of honor, the dynamic young leaders joining us from across our beautiful continent of Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, good day and welcome to the first round of the NextGen Africa Talk 2026, a platform designed not just for conversation, but for courageous dialogue, not just for ideas, but for action. Our theme is tomorrow's leaders, today's conversation. It is in this vein that we are also not gathering here as spectators, but as architects of Africa's future, which is a paradox, a home to the world's youngest population, yet facing stubborn barriers to trade, employment, and global influence. From the pyramids of Cairo to the Cape Point of South Africa, rise a new Africa. The question is, how do we then turn this moment into unstoppable progress? Today, we bring together experience and innovation, wisdom and boldness, legacy and vision. We are here to explore how today's leaders can intentionally pass the baton to tomorrow's change makers, ensuring that Africa's youthful majority is not waiting in the wings, but actively shaping policy, business, governance, and community development. My name is Sibongile Eunice Dlamini from the tiny kingdom of Eswatini, and I'm humbled to serve you as your moderator. My role is to guide this conversation with balance, respect, and purpose, ensuring that every voice is heard, every perspective is valued, and every contribution moves us closer to a shared African future. Our housekeeping rules are that we are going to give each panelist 15 minutes presentation slot, and feedback will be provided at the end of all the presentation. Let us engage openly, let us challenge constructively, and above all, let us leave this platform more united in our commitment to building the Africa we want. I'm honored to share the stage with our distinguished panelists who bring diverse expertise in entrepreneurship, trade policy, development, and leadership. To my valued panelists, thank you for honoring this invite. May I introduce them? We have 3 panelists from the different parts of Africa. First is Malawi. We have Mr. Rex Chapata. He is the Executive Director of the National Youth Council. Mr. Chapota is a table turner in the Malawian Youth, in the Malawian Youth Council's program with one game-changing strategy, prioritizing youth involvement in agricultural transformation as a pathway for job creation and economic empowerment in the new strategy plan 2024 to 2030. Second, we have South Africa, Miss Raeti Lepalati, a social worker and a writer. She is a trailblazer, a pioneer in young female leadership that has taken space through feminist advocacy, challenging societal structures and impact mental well-being in the African context. However, centers on Afrocentric mental health and intersectionality of identity in accessing inclusive mental health care. Finally, we have Ghana, the host nation of the NextGen Africa Talk 2026. From Ghana, we have Mr. Sheriff Guy, the CEO of Ghana Chamber of Young Entrepreneurs and the president of GYF. He is a policy shaper and programs coordinator for young people, expanding meaningful youth participation in national decision-making processes, representing them in national legislation committed to measurable impact for Ghana's youth. Now, let us hear the 15 minutes presentation from each one of you about a vision for Africa's future and leadership and investment. First, may we start with Malawi. Mr. Rex Chapota, please take the floor, sir.
Thank you so much. I'm trying to share my screen. Can I confirm if you can see my screen? Okay, thank you so much. My name is Rex Chapota, and I'm coming from the National Youth Council of Malawi. I want to share on a topic which is dear to me, and it's a privilege and an honor to be in this conversation this afternoon. I've entitled my presentation, Youth, the Untapped Power to Drive the Africa We Want. Youth, the Untapped Power to Drive the Africa We Want. And we shall zero in on the case study of the National Youth Council of Malawi. Indeed, as we all know, Africa has the youngest population in the world. And this is not different for Malawi, where over 70% of our population of around 2 million is below the age of 35. As we have heard, lots of Africa's youth are classified as not in any employment, education institution, and training. And for Malawi, it is around 25% above the average. This shows that the issue of youth unemployment is rising despite the development 20 years which won. Therefore, I'm asking a question, is this a demographic dividend or a demographic disruption? In terms of the National Youth Council of Malawi, is an institution that has been undergoing an institutional resurgence. It was established some good 30 years ago as a national coordinating authority for youth development by an act of parliament. However, it has performed at a very limited potential over the years. Therefore, in the last 24 months, when I came in as the executive director of the Youth Council and my new leadership, we started to do repositioning of the council, which is very critical to the conversation today. Number one, we made sure we reassess the leadership in youth sector implementation and coordination. We also made sure that there is increase in resources available to do youth development. But we also elevated the standing of young people in the national policy and governance processes. and thereby expanding our national programming and strategic convening. But what does this mean in this conversation? What we see is that if there is restoration of institutional credibility of youth councils as coordinating mechanisms in line with the African Youth Charter, then the youth agenda can turn around. But also we do see that there is need to recognize young people as a national development priority at all levels. And indeed, we need to transition the youth agenda from marginal relevance to strategic influence if indeed our young people can be the great potential in the Africa we want. Therefore, I submit this afternoon, this morning to others, that institutional strength of the youth coordinating mechanism in any nation is the foundation of effective youth transformation that can change our nations and Africa at large. Therefore, I want to share our experiences by using the word rises, R-I-S-E-S. I want to use those words because I want us to understand that when youth rise, Africa rises. And the rises are 5 key points which have become our turning around strategy to bring the youth issues at the center of programming in our nation. R, the need to raise the youth agenda. I, the need to ensure innovations are there for accelerated economic empowerment. S, we need to shape governance at all levels for the youth benefit. E, we need to empower youth-led institutions. And S, we need to shift the mindsets. Remember, when youth rise, Africa rises. The first R, we need to raise the youth agenda to the highest decision levels. Where I sit as a council, in most cases, issues to do with young people are taken lightly. But I want to posit in this webinar that the youth development agenda must sit at the highest decision-making level, including at plot number 1 in our countries, at cabinet level, at parliamentary level, at national and decentralized planning levels. The youth agenda must come out very, very clearly. In Malawi, our Vision 2063 is dubbed a youth-centric vision. But we need to go beyond what's written to make it a reality. And for that to happen, we need to make deliberate engagements, including at the presidential level and also at private sector with civil society, because we need to make sure people understand what is youth development. And what this means is that when we embed youth priority in national development frameworks, including budget priorities, then we start looking at the youth agenda as a governance priority, not a side docket. Time is gone for the youth agenda to be on the sidelines. It has to be part of the menu. Therefore, I posit that if youth leaders across Africa speak with one voice, youth policy shifts from sectoral to being strategic. The youth question ought to be at every decision-making body. Our strategy number 2 under the rises is I, innovations for accelerated economic empowerment. As we all say here, unemployment is a major challenge. But we need to move beyond the employability rhetoric. Youth are not just job seekers, they ought to be job creators. And as the National Youth Council of Malawi, we are taking this very, very seriously, because we do realize that young people of Africa are innovators, they are creators and industrial actors. But more often than not, they are not assisted. They're not given the tools, they're not given the capital for them to exercise that potential. Therefore, in the case of Malawi, the National Youth Council of Malawi has initiated the Youth Innovation Fund, a program which the government of Malawi has put in resources to target innovation which can bring in to industrialization, so that young people do participate in all sectors of the economy, as our president once again always say. Therefore, I want to posit this afternoon that we need to shift young people from informal survival activities to a structured, growth-oriented enterprises. That's the only way we can be able to tap into the AFDCTA. Otherwise, it will just be another song. Strategy number 3, S. We need to shape governance at all levels so that young people's voices are amplified. From the perspective of the National Youth Council of Malawi, we want to go from protest to policy influence. It's not only the militancy that will make a difference, but it's that kind of intergenerational discourse on topical issues. As the National Youth Council of Malawi, every fortnight from this year, we're having a conversation, drawing hundreds of young people so that they can be able to start engaging in those matters and start. So I was saying that another key matter is to bring in youth voices in shaping governance at all levels. And this ought to go from just protest to policy influence, so that young people are part and parcel of intergenerational discourse on topical issues. That's why I love the discussion today, because that's what we are doing every fortnight in Malawi right now. Hundreds of young people gather together through the internet, but also in their groups at our districts, discussing key issues so that we influence the youth agenda at every policy process. In the last 2 weeks, for example, we were discussing the state of the national address. So when the president made his speech in parliament, young people were dissecting the speech to see what does this mean for the young people of our nation, and want that to be reflected also in the budget. So what we are saying is youth ought to be visible in all decisions and be seen to be driving the agenda forward. Our strategy number 4 is to empower and build agency of youth-led institutions. In Malawi, in the last 18 months, we have done a national mapping of all youth institutions. These are youth clubs, youth networks, youth-led organizations, so that we don't talk in isolation. We're able to speak on what is happening on the ground. And what I've discovered is the need for deliberate capacity building for these youth structures in governance, in financial accountability, so that they can be trusted to move the agenda forward. And also what I've discovered is that as we monitor them, track them, there are beautiful stories of what young people are doing in their communities, which in most cases, it's not celebrated. And as a youth council, we are taking that, harvesting those lessons, and bring them to the national level. What we are saying is strong youth-led institutions will lead to stronger collective voice and will bring the dividend to young people. Lastly, we need to start looking at the shift of mindsets. This mindset which thinks it can't happen in Africa, Africa cannot work. We need to shift that mindset. We need to start sharing and showing our young people that it's possible to transform Africa. Therefore, in the Malawi 2033 vision, mindset change is one of the enablers. And as a youth council, we are putting that narrative in our programming so that we don't lose hope for our nation. No matter what leaders are doing, good or bad, we're telling young people that remember that it's you who are carrying the torch into the future, and you can't give up on your nation. What we're saying is structural transformation begins with psychological transformation. And as a youth council, we are doing that in all our programming. In conclusion, we are saying we do realize that Africa's youth challenge is not isolated. It is structural, it is geopolitical, it is urgent. But our experience demonstrates that youth institutions can be repositioned. We have shown that policy influence can be strengthened. Youth empowerment can be intentional. Governance participation can be structured, and mindsets can shift toward transformation. If Africa is to claim its place in a shifting global order, youth and youth-led institutions must evolve from just being mobilizers to architects of structural reform. That's the way we can move the agenda forward. And in Malawi, it's happening. And we want to see more youth councils pushing the needle forward so that young people are at the driving seat of all key policy and implementation processes. Thank you so much. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chakota. This is very exciting. A beautiful plan that we will have an engagement after all the presenters, after all the panelists have made a presentation. Now, let us cross over to South Africa. Miss Rayati, please.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. Doc, it's nice to finally meet you and see you in person. We've been talking over the phone. It's good to finally meet you. Thank you so much to our panelists, to the other panelists, and thank you for having me. I am Reatile Polaki. I am a social worker. I am a writer, and I am a feminist. I use my writing to talk about mental health, to talk about inclusive mental health care and intersectionality of mental health and other social issues. And I truly believe in the methods of Africans, in African-centric methods and knowledge systems. So let me also share my screen and present for you. I'm going to be taking you through the implications of youth mental health on the development of Africa. And while I was doing this research, I found this quote from Tony Elumelu, who's from Nigeria, which says, from the African perspective, development is a matter of realizing our potential and making the progress that we know is humanly possible because others have gotten there. So it's very, very possible that the things that we're going to be talking about today throughout this session, they are possible just because we are Africans, just because we are deemed from quote unquote third world country does not make them any less possible. They are possible because we've seen them done before. We just need to put a unique approach that is ours and from our knowledge base to our development. So Africa's youth demographic, as we have had been talked about, 60% of the population in Africa is between 15 and 35, my mistake, making Africa the youngest continent in the world. And unfortunately, 1 in 7 of young people in Africa are suffering from significant mental health challenges. And mental health, whether we want to acknowledge it or not, determines whether our youth and we as the youth will be drivers for our economic growth, for our development, or we will leave them behind. Now, I think the question before we go anywhere is, what is mental health? Mental health is defined as a state of emotional, social, psychological well-being that enables individuals to be productive, to cope with life stresses, and to contribute to their community. This is a very well-rounded definition that we all use in the field, and that has been provided by the World Health Organization, and in it saying contribute, be productive, to cope with life stresses, to contribute to their community, we see where development comes in here. When we're productive, we're able to shape and to contribute to our communities. We're able to work, we're able to go out there and be innovative and to add to the development and to play a significant part in the development of Africa. So, mental health as human capital. Human capital represents the economic value of a worker's combined knowledge, their skills, their experience, their health, their education, which increases the productivity and drive of economic growth. So without mental health, we're missing a big piece of the equation to our human capital. As our last presenter said, and I think one of our keynote speakers today, they mentioned that we are the mineral. The youth of Africa are the precious minerals. And without taking care of mental health, youth mental health in particular, we are shooting ourselves in the foot. We are making sure that we are leaving these people behind, that we are not productive, that we are not driving economic growth. Without healthy individuals, we cannot have thriving economies and sustainable development. So I'm going to go through different aspects of mental health and all of the other things it intersects with. Firstly, mental health and education. Poor mental health leads to reduced learning and concentration, high dropout rates, and low academic achievement. And in turn, this becomes a low skill base, a reduced workforce, and lower economic transformation. You find that across our countries in Africa, we are consistently and always importing knowledge. We're always importing people from outside, from whether it be South America, North America, China, India, wherever else in the world, to bring skills that we don't have, because we don't have those skills because of many, many factors, some of them being mental health. When young people cannot concentrate in their class, when they're dropping out of their classes because they are having mental health issues, we are stifling our growth. We cannot have and we cannot be participants of our own futures if we are not there to finish our education in the first place. And even when we do finish that education, you find that people with a history of mental illness are unable to reach their fullest potential. When you are unwell, you are unable to be the best that you can be, giving us a very low skill base that is often exploited and left out of the big rooms. Because when your skill base is only at a certain level, you are unable to get into the rooms that are scientists, that are all of these mechanics, all of these different fields that often needs much, much higher education qualifications. And so again, we're being left out of the conversation because we're not there in the rooms. And yes, even though some of these rooms were not designed for us, we put ourselves in a better position to be in these rooms when we're educated and also bring our history, our knowledge as Africans, our skills. We have so many plants, we have so many knowledge bases, we have so many skills that are just part of who we are as a people of this continent that can bring so much innovation and difference to so many fields that we are doing ourselves a disservice by not paying attention to the crucial link between mental health and education. So mental health also affects social stability. It affects cohesion and participation. Mental health affects relationships, which in turn affects the social cohesion and active participation of the community. Social stability and social relationships depend on us feeling good about ourselves, not being isolated. And mental health is an isolating subject. It's an isolating thing to be mentally ill. And you find that it also leads to people who are disenfranchised and also who are hopeless. And people who are hopeless cannot participate in the community because they see no need. They can't participate in the community because they are unable to. They don't have the energy to do so because they are facing serious challenges psychologically. Mental health challenges also lead to violence and substance abuse, mostly substance abuse. The misconception is that people with mental illnesses are violent people. You are very unlikely to be attacked by a person with a mental illness. However, mental health illnesses are one of the risk factors for substance abuse, and substance abuse usually goes together with violence. Where there's a lot of substance abuse, you will find violence, which now further disenfranchises certain groups, especially women and children. They become the brunt of the violence that is exacted upon them. Further now, disenfranchising them, isolating them, and putting them in survival mode such that they're unable to contribute to their communities. The social bonds that we have break down with violence, with substance and drug abuse, right? And this leads to lack of civil participation. We have a lot of youth that are not voting, that are not protesting, that are not speaking truth to power because they are under a lot of stress. You are not worried about what the parliament is doing when you are worried next about where your next meal is going to come from, or whether you're going to make it through the night because you live with an abusive partner who's mentally ill or is abusing substances. We are unable to participate in our civil duty, in our communal activities when we are stressed and only wanting to be alive. We're not thriving, we're but living day to day on the edge. Additionally, mental health greatly affects economic growth and productivity. It affects employment readiness. Mental health affects how ready we are to go to work and how we show up in the workplace. When somebody is mentally ill, they may not be able to meet their deadlines. They may not be able to also relate well to other people, to collaborate within that environment. It also makes people less productive because they are depressed or they're anxious or they're worried about things at home. With that much stress, people are only doing what they can to get by. And with economic growth, we want to see productivity. We want to see a greater output. We want to see innovation. But low motivation and not being ready to step into the employment space leads to a low output and to no growth, no innovation at all. We cannot tap into our potential when we are consistently and always worried about what is next about your mental health and you're not feeling in your best self. Remember that our definition specified and really, really put emphasis on being able to cope with life stresses and be able to give back and contribute to our communities. You can't do that if one aspect of your well-being is off center, when even though you are physically healthy, you are facing a mental health challenge, you cannot be productive, you cannot be innovative. And this seriously slows down our growth as Africa. Now, this one is a huge one, as we all know that a lot of our countries that we live in are facing serious poverty and inequality. And poverty and inequality create a cycle of disadvantage where you have poverty, and poverty will lead to psychological stress. When you don't know what you're going to eat, where it's going to come from, whether today your children are going to be able to go to the doctor, whether how long you're going to be there at the public hospital because you're going to spend hours because you don't have money for private care, it leads to psychological stress. And psychological stress can lead to people having mental health crises. Now, this is where people are no longer able to function. They are going through a mental health crisis, whether it be depression, suicidality, drug and substance abuse, anxiety. All of these things altogether are very debilitating, which now in turn becomes reduced earning. When somebody is not well mentally, they cannot earn well. Even if you're an entrepreneur and you're not hired, if you're having a mental health crisis, you may not be able to show up to work. You are also less likely to find work when you have a history of mental illness or you are currently having a mental health crisis. Unfortunately, we're still living in a culture that has stigmatized mental illness so much that even when somebody has a history of it and is doing well now and is going through treatment, they are less likely to be hired because they are seen as a liability. People who are in a mental health crisis, have a history of mental illness, are less likely to be hired and are less likely to participate in the economy, either because they cannot be hired or their families feel like they're protecting them by keeping them isolated and away, which in turn perpetuates poverty. It puts them in a place where they're not earning anything and they cannot contribute to their livelihoods. And so it is a vicious cycle where one begets the other and one cannot be dealt with in isolation. We cannot talk about poverty and not talk about the things that are contributing to the states of poverty that we're seeing, to mental health crisis. We cannot separate one away from the other. And in working in silos, we are just further making sure that our development does not come, that we do not ever reach a place where development becomes a thing for us. So we were having this conversation, right, about mental health care and mental health. And the question I'm sure becomes, why are we just not doing the thing? Well, we have barriers to mental health care that could otherwise be, if these things were to be addressed, then we'd be in a better position to deal with the mental health crisis that we know that young people specifically are facing. The world is changing so much in front of young people: climate change, unemployment. We were said to be given the keys to success. We went to school, we did all the right things, and yet we are unemployed. And yet we don't know if we will get to adulthood because of the tensions in the world, wars and climate change, and sickness also. We don't know if we're going to get to where we were supposed to get, and we're not getting the things that we were promised because of education. They say go to school and get a job, but you go to school, you do your master's, you do your PhD even, and yet we're still unemployed. So mental health is significantly affecting the younger generation, the very generation that we are dependent on to push our development and put us on the map. So barriers to mental health care include limited healthcare. There's a very low number of healthcare facilities well equipped for mental illness. Some countries don't have psychiatrists. Some don't have enough psychiatric hospital. They don't have enough psychologists. And on top of that, there's so many challenges and barriers to becoming a mental health care professional. In South Africa, it is about 7 years of school, and then getting into masters alone is a hassle. So the barriers within the field are also there, making it harder and harder for people to make a change and to at least expand the amount of healthcare facilities and healthcare we have. Additionally, the limited healthcare is also because mental health care is expensive. When people try to go away from publicly funded mental health care, private funded mental health care, private psychologists are expensive, with it not being accessible for people, especially who are living in poverty and people who are not earning well, as we know that some of our countries and some of our youth are severely underpaid and they cannot access these expensive services. Additionally, there's a lot of stigma surrounding mental health, especially because of the misinformation and the taboo nature of the topic. We don't talk about it. We think about it as, oh, this is things for white people. This thing is for, this is not African. This is an African. But if we were to look back, right, and if we were to look back into our history prior to colonization, you would see that it is very African. African health is very comprehensive. It takes in part every single aspect of a person and deals with that. We've had healers who are traditional healers in our communities for generations. And these healers have never said that this is an African. They've always dealt with mental health in the way that has worked for our forefathers. So the idea that this mental health is an African is false. Mental health is African. Well-being is central to who we are as Africans. We see it in the way that our communities are structured, in the way that we care for each other. We have this saying across Africa, you know, I am who I am because you are. In my home language, we will say that moto ke moto ka batho, you know, a person is a person because of other people. Those are the such things that show us that really mental health is just a fancy word now. We may have not had the word for it in English, but we did always nurture well-being mentally. The last one is underfunding. About 1% or less of health budget goes to mental health. And that means that in almost every country in Africa, there is such little money going towards mental health that it is impossible for it to cover all of our needs. So what can we do? So the interventions we can do is that we can integrate primary health care to include mental health at a very, very early age so that we are proactive rather than reactive to mental health. Early intervention, encouraging our people, our young people to get help as quickly as possible so that the outcomes are not dire and that we do not have negative outcomes is very, very important. Funding. It is very important to fund mental health. If we want for young people to participate in the development, we have to be able to fund and solve one of the biggest challenges, which is mental health at the moment. And most importantly, we have to be willing to collaborate. Different sectors must be able to collaborate and stop working in silos. Oftentimes we talk about development as in a silo without thinking about poverty, mental health, gender-based violence, all of these things. All of our ministries, all of our institutions must stop working in silos and work more collaboratively. That way we are able to come together to find solutions that are holistic. Working in silos maintains the status quo, but working together, coming up with holistic solutions that are interdisciplinary makes sure that we are solving this problem, every aspect of this problem, the risk factors, and it also ensures that we are coming together with our different skill sets to make sure that we are solving the problems for Africa and by Africans. That said, I think I will stop here. Thank you very much. Without a comprehensive approach to mental health, we are risking leaving behind a key population that has ideas, the creativity, the energy to take Africa where we all know that she could go. That said, thank you so much for the opportunity, and I look forward to the discussion with everybody. Thank you.
Very insightful. May we quickly rush to the last country, the host country of the African 2026. Mr. Sheriff Khan, please take the floor, sir.
You sound familiar. Yes, hello and good afternoon from Ghana. I hope you can see me. Apologies. I am traveling, but I have to join this all-important discussion because it's something that has to do with the future of African youth and that of Ghana. And so permit me to also quickly see how I can bring up my presentation. It's going to be a bit brief, like I said, as I am on the road, but it's very important to join. Thank you very much, Doctor, the team, for this opportunity. So my name is Sharif Gali. Whilst I pull my presentation up, my name is Sharif Gali. I am the Chief Executive Officer of the Ghana Chamber of Young Entrepreneurs. I also preside as the President for the Ghana Youth Federation, and I'll be talking a bit more about them, so we appreciate what they are and what they stand for. And so we will delve in. I am coming from the, like the MC said, or the host said, I'm coming from the home, host of this program. We are glad to say that Doctor is one of us, but he always say that he's for Africa and he's for the world as far as young people are concerned. But I am coming from Ghana, and Ghana, as we all know, is one of Africa's most stable political democracies in Africa, and it's very important I tout on that. We have quite a lot of active private sector and youth startup ecosystem in Ghana, even though our innovation is more skewed towards agriculture, but we have a huge number of young people who are startups from Ghana. We have a young and ambitious population as a country, a beautiful country. Of course, those of you remember a few days ago, Ghana and Zambia, we have a fugu. So if you don't have your fugu, maybe Doctor will be getting our colleagues from the other African countries fugu very soon. But we have a very youthful and ambitious population driving our innovation, and we are strategically, economically, the gateway for African trade and as a continent. And I'm sure we would get to appreciate that. But let me zero into the most important thing, looking at the key asset we are talking about, which is youth. In Ghana, we are talking about 57% upwards up to about 60, making the population of youth. So that sends a signal. And what signal does it send? It sends a signal of great youth democratic dividend. It sends a signal of youth bulge. That means we have a huge number of Ghanaians being young people. And these young people are in different aspects of our economy. We have youth in almost all the sectors. Ghana actually have what we call a youth policy document that the country has been working with for years. And I wouldn't go much into that because I know the authority in charge of implementing youth program is there would share. I am leading the private sector and that of the independent youth in Ghana. We have such a system in Ghana. So let me talk about the Ghana Chamber of Young Entrepreneurs. Enough of Ghana. I'm sure we all know a bit more about Ghana. The Ghana Chamber of Young Entrepreneurs, where I lead, is the National Association of Young People Doing Business. Like I said, we have a greater number of young people who are startups and youth entrepreneurs. How do we ensure that these people are coordinated? They are supported. There's a structure that supports them. So in 2015, we came out with the Ghana Chamber of Young Entrepreneurs. It was officially registered and legalized in 2016 and launched. And since then, our work has been first to support enterprise support. So basically what we do, build the capacity of SMEs owned by young people, open them to grant. As I speak to you now, I'm on the road going to another part of the country, the northern part of the country, to lead a government program that is giving funding or grants to young people called a Jumawara. It's a Ghanaian language, so if you can't mention it, I will teach you later. And these are some of the things that Chamber play a role in to participate in some of this central government investment for youth, so we can be able to select qualified young people and get them to benefit. We also help young people to formalize their business and also create market linkages for them. We organize one of the biggest young entrepreneurs gathering every year in Ghana, where we bring young. So with the chamber, basically business support, enterprise support, that's what we've been doing. We also are very much big on policy engagement. You see, you cannot support business without ensuring that the support system is connected to policy. And a lot of times, policy go that parallel way and implementations and programs go this way, and it doesn't really connect. So we see the importance of policy and programming connecting together for sustainability, for continuity, and for investment. And so we actively engage in policy engagement. We have led a process with other stakeholders to develop the Ghana Innovation Startup Bill, a bill for youth. At the moment, we are underway discussing, working, or coming out with a policy called the Ghana Youth Entrepreneurship Startup Agency or Support Agency that would convert an existing program into an agency. And all of this has been our engagement in policy. We led a policy engagement some 7 years back that got the government to give young entrepreneurs some tax waivers. These are some of the policy engagement we have also been on, advocating for finance and procurement inclusion. One of the other things we also do is that we do policy, what we call policy coordination, where we ensure that we bring ecosystem together. We just don't do some of these things alone. Private sector partnership, we facilitate that. We also develop partner collaboration. Like I said, the chamber believes that it is not just a one-person thing to develop young, especially young entrepreneurs, when we want to make young people economically viable and for them to contribute in the economy of our country. And so we collaborate a lot. One of the partnership is what we are doing with Dr. and the team to ensure that we are not just limiting our work, but we are opening up to work with others. We also do regional inclusion beyond Africa. As I speak to you, I also double as a chairperson for the Commonwealth Alliance of Young Entrepreneurs, which is the Commonwealth Youth Network focusing on youth entrepreneurship development across the Commonwealth region. That is about 21 countries in Africa. And it is basically the same thing, creating the partnership. And this is what the Chamber of Young Entrepreneurs have been focused on. And over the years, we have not just mobilized young entrepreneurs, trained them, advocate. We have also opened doors for them. We have created platform for them to speak to government, and we have worked closely with the National Youth Authority over the years that have been very supportive because they are clouded by authority as the umbrella body responsible for facilitating youth development. And so we've worked with them and all other entities. Now let me speak a bit. Doctor said I have two things to do. One is a chamber, one is the Ghana Youth Federation. Ghana also have a youth federation, which is the constitutional back body under the NYA Act. So listening to my brother who spoke first from Malawi, if I got it right, they have a youth council. And then I'm sure they also have a governmental or a government authority that deals with youth development. Here in Ghana is the same thing. We have the National Youth Authority. They have the ultimate power to facilitate youth development in the country. The framing of the Constitution or the Act of the NYA realized that there's a need for Ghana to have an independent youth body that would coordinate and mobilize youth to participate in national development. You see, the NYA here in Ghana, the head is appointed by the president. So basically, you know, the CEO may not go against his president and would have to work in the middle. But now, if we have a federation that is independent, that brings every other youth group together, we are able to speak to issues devoid of partisanship, devoid of where you come from, asking you who you know, where you belong, and whatever stereotype that may make a young person not to participate. Creating a platform for every young person, no matter who you are, to be able to speak to national issue, contribute to national issue, and also gain the national cake. That is what the federation is for. And hopefully this current government was able to inaugurate it. We are working to institute it across the country to ensure that we have an independent youth body that will drive youth development across Ghana. I've already spoken about this, but I just want to edge a bit more. We are seeing a very strong support from government and in terms of business across the country. And then we have seen that our government, at the end of the day, listen to youth. There have been a lot of advisory groups that have been created. But this one is just to share how the Ghana ecosystem is working as far as government engagement strategy is concerned. There's formal consultations happening everywhere and youth are engaging. Our president every year, the new president actually, makes it a point to engage different groups. At the moment, as I speak to you now, the Federation have written to the ministry and its agencies to facilitate a meeting between the president himself and the youth. And you see, when your president have that open window or open door policy where young people get closer, it makes young people say directly to. All right. So to conclude, I'm talking about these are just opportunities I want to share that for us with the chamber perspective in Ghana, we are hosting AFCFTA, the African Free Continental Trade Area. And we know the import it has. We know what it can offer to the African young person. And so we are saying that no matter where you are, how would the youth in Africa work together, become our own partnership, create our own collaboration? It is not all the time we need government to do all that we are asking of. And to be honest with you, I feel like government cannot even do all. I was on a national TV this morning. I was being honest. I'm saying that sometimes governments even overpromise because it's not everything you can do. You allow private sector to play a role and allow the young people to also play their role. And I think that we have a youth ecosystem in Africa that if we can come together, this will be my concluding remark. If we can come together, Doctor said something when I met him some time ago, that if the youth can come together, we can be able to be more powerful to the extent that we are even supporting our government. Imagine the young people in Africa comes together to say, we are forming our own Africa Chamber of Young Entrepreneurs. We are supporting ourselves. Imagine how powerful we become. One thing that is lacking in our ecosystem is unity. Partisanship, yes, it's affecting us across Ghana, across Africa. I have had the privilege to work on. But what is lacking is unity and collaboration among entities and among the youth. You see youth agencies not working together, and you see youth not working together. So I call for unity as I end my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kali. That was very insightful.